Hey everybody, well I'm here with my big old box of my Super Famicom and Super Nintendo games, and I figured I would finally do my full collection video. I know I teased you all the other day with that other video, just kind of barely looking at my games, but I figured today is finally the day where I actually do the entire collection video. Alright, we'll start with some boxed games. First up is Reunite Adventures. It's based on an anime, and it's kind of a Zelda-style game. More so RPG. It has some weird, like first-person mech fighting elements in it. It's an interesting title. I think I got it for... I bought it for really cheap, just kind of to have the box because I loved the art. But it's an interesting game. Next up is the SD The Great Battle, which I've already talked about. Great, fun little game. I definitely recommend importing this when the virus is gone and the shipping prices have gone down. Next game here is Sailor Moon R. Now I actually have a funny story with this one, and the cart is not actually in there, it's in my box over here. But when I ordered this game, I didn't think I was getting it complete in box. I thought I was just getting it loose. So I ordered it, and when the package showed up, I was like, why is this so big? And I opened it up and I was shocked to find out that I had gotten it complete in box, even though it is pretty beaten up. But regardless, as a big Sailor Moon fan, this was pretty awesome to get. Next up is one of the first SNES games I ever got when I started collecting physically a number of years back, and that was Wolfchild. Wolfchild is it's an interesting game. It's a side-scroller. It's not bad. It has, oh my god, Wolfchild is a fast-paced action extravaganza, sheer unadulterated mayhem. Not quite sure I would go that far, but it's an alright platformer. Look at that, I got this $8, if this thing will focus. $8. Complete in box. And then next up is one of my favorite games of all time. I've talked about it on the channel. F-Zero. And this was factory sealed when I got it, and I think it was $15. $15 at this old game store called Game Haven. This is another one of the first games I got when I was collecting or when I just gotten my Super Nintendo. And I had like 2 games, and I walked in and I was looking for something like good, because the 2 games I had were alright. I'll talk about them a little bit. And I saw this and immediately bought it and was very, very happy. And this thing is still in great condition. I even have the little comic in there still, and the cart's actually in that box. Alright, next set of boxed games. First up is The Last Battle. This is, it's an interesting, middle-of-the-road JRPG. I mainly got it, once again, because I like the box art, and it was like $6. Free shipping from Japan, so I picked it up. It's not a bad game, but not the greatest. It does have some pretty cool Mode 7 in there. Alright, next up is a really cool game that I will talk about at some point in the future, and that's GKO Power Pro Wrestling from Konami. This has some pretty impressive graphics. They're the silicon graphics, kind of like Donkey Kong Country. Yeah, kind of like the other. I don't know. I'm not the biggest Donkey Kong fan, so I've not played much of the Donkey Kong games on SNES. But yeah, has graphics much like that. Looks pretty good. I believe I showed this in my last video. It's my complete in-box Battle Racers. This was probably my most expensive game. Well, maybe second most expensive game behind Earthbound. This is Akakawa Jiro. I think I showed this one too. It's an interesting horror text adventure. And then, speaking of Sailor Moon, and this goes right along with my last video, as Goldfish Warning shows up in Nakiyoshi, not Nakiyoshi Plaza, and Panic in Nakiyoshi World. And I, of course, have talked about this one in my cheap yet good Super Famicom games. Alright, first up we have Bomberman 3. Super Famicom version. here's a game you'll hear me talk about at some point. I have this script written. It's been written for a while, but it's Battle Masters, and I'm just gonna say the less I say about this game, the better. Autofocus, you're not doing any surface here. But yeah, the less I say about this game, the better, as you'll hear me talk about it in the future. Here's an interesting little mini-game collection called Verse Collection. Not the greatest game, but it was interesting enough to buy for $10 some point last year. I'll probably talk about that game eventually. Here's one of my early reviews, Idono no Kiba. I still feel the same way. This game is it's a middle of the road game. It has some. It starts off strong and then kind of just disappoints by the end. All right, next batch. Right off the top. I don't know when this video is going to come out. Probably very soon. But if it is not before, it will either be before or after this review comes out for Twinbee Rainbow Bell Adventure. Bomberman 4, another one of the Bomberman games. I got this one, 3, and a couple other games in a lot for about $60. I want to say 2 years ago. Oh, here's Sailor Moonar. There's the cart. And then, ooh, this is a very nostalgic game for me. Astrogogo. Now this is an F-Zero ripoff, but the reason this game is so nostalgic is because this was the very first Super Famicom game I ever imported. And I got it for Christmas, oh, geez, 9th or 8th grade, so, almost 10 years ago, when I started collecting for the Super Famicom. Yep, this was the one that really started it all as far as me collecting physical Super Famicom carts. And I will forever love this game, even though it is pretty bad. I will certainly talk about this in a review at some point. I've been wanting to for years. As a matter of fact, I actually talked about that game on an old channel of mine. A channel that will go unnamed. Here we have Fatal Fury Special. Let's see. This version is only slightly better than the American version because there's boob jiggle. But this is a great fighting game. For the longest time, I preferred the Fatal Fury series over Street Fighter, and that only changed up until the last couple of years here. Alright, well these two games go hand in hand, so I'm just going to show them at the same time. And that is Sanrio World Smash Ball, and what I would consider its spiritual sequel, Pop and Smash. They're nearly the same exact game. You will hear me talk about these in a future video. Moving right along, we have Contra 3, The Alien Wars, and I specifically bought the import version because of the 30 lives code. Because, I mean, I love Contra, but I'm not the greatest Contra player, and also this game is balls hard. So, I made sure I got the version with the 30 lives code so I could sit back and relax and play the game and not pull my hairs out, trying to be the best there ever was. Alright, next up we have Final Fight, a rather inferior Super Nintendo port, but still a good port if you're playing by yourself, but that's not really where the fun of the game is had. Right here we have one of the bad Ranma 1/2 games, the terrible ones, the worst one. There are 3 different games. There's this one, there's Hard Battle, which is the only one that came out in the States, and then there's a really good one that is in my collection that I'll talk about here soon enough. But this is the terrible one, and I can't remember. This got reskinned and came out in the States, and I can't remember what it's called. It'll pop up on screen probably right now. But yeah, that's that Ranma 1/2 game. Speaking of fighting games, here we have Flashhider's SFX. Now, Flashhider started out as a awesome fighting game on the PC Engine, and I think this is the sequel that came out on the Super Nintendo, and this is another one of the another early game I imported because the graphics were so awesome, and then it's a fucking fantastic fighting game with some like RPG elements, because after fights you can go to like this arena type area and spend points to upgrade your character and stuff like that. It's a fascinating game. I will certainly talk about it at some point. Here's a game I've reviewed already. Super Ninja-kun. Still a pretty fun game. Still holds up for me. Yep. Next up is Gokujo Parodius. This is the only Parodius game I actually own in my collection currently because, what is it, Jikyo Parodius and Sexy Parodius are both kind of expensive, but I have no excuse for not owning the just Parodius on the Super Nintendo. I just have not bought it yet, mainly because the price kind of stays in the same price point, and I'm always looking to snag some of the harder to find and slowly rising games, or games slowly rising in price. Here's Sengoku, the not so talked about Super Nintendo port. Now, it is not as good as the Neo Geo game, of course, but it's not a bad port. It's alright. It's serviceable. You play it and you go, yeah, this is Sengoku, just with a couple things cut out. This is a game I have a history with. Early on in my Super Nintendo collecting days, I came across this ROM and was like, oh wow, Sengoku has a port on the Super Nintendo, and I played it, and I liked it. But I never bought it back then, and I want to say it was going for like $15 to $20, and it wasn't until, I want to say sometime last year, maybe late 2018, when I finally bought the cart, and the price had gone up to like, I don't want to say I spent like $36, maybe $40 with shipping. Ridiculous. Ridiculous, man. Oh man, I'm starting to get some wobbly towers over here, Super Famicom carts. That's the only problem with these things. They do not stack well at all. And of course they don't have end labels. Alright, one of my favorite games on the system, Flying Hero. You've already heard me talk about this game on the channel, but what can I say besides this game is probably the best shooter on the system besides maybe Space Mega Force. Alright, we have Mickey's Magical Adventures in the... Mickey's Adventures in the Magical Kingdom, or something like that. This, not to be confused with any of the Magical Quest games, as these were made by Capcom, and this game was not. This is made by Toei, and it is not a very good game. I bought it. I bought it for $1, so I can't really complain. And it plays alright until you get to, I want to say, like the second or third level, where there are these annoying air shafts that will push you all the way back to the start of the level if you miss a jump or fuck up, and it's pretty easy to do in this game. So I think I got 2-3 levels in this before I put it down, probably for the rest of my entire life. Well, here is the prequel to Sailor Moon R, and that's just Sailor Moon. Fun game. Both of those games are serviceable beat-em-ups, and for fans of Sailor Moon like myself, they're good fun. And then, of course, I already showed Magical Quest. I only have the first one. I need to get the second and third one here soon. But right now, I only have the first and third. Or, I only have the first game. Alright, dipping into a couple US games here. But first, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. Easily one of the greatest fighting games of all time. This is my preferred Street Fighter. I do like the new challengers on the SNES, but I do not own that yet. But I mean, once you've got one version of Super Street Fighter, you kind of have them all. Alright, here's a wonderful reproduction of Clock Tower, one of the best Super Nintendo games, I would say. It's one of the only survival horror games for the system, and this is Human's wonderful take on Dario Argento films and such. Ooh, here's a pretty infamous cover. The wonderful Rival Turf. It's a pretty good, I think it's part of the Peace Buster series. It's a pretty good game. And I got this for $5 at a pawn shop probably 3 years ago or something like that, which is not bad. Ooh, here's another great game. Illusion of Gaia. This is one of those games that I would kind of consider a seasonal game. And it's one I pull out around New Year's and Thanksgiving, as I have some memories tied to this game, which I'll probably talk about at some point. Ooh, my tower's getting a little wobbly over there. Next up is UN Squadron, famously based off of Area 88, which is a pretty cool anime. I got this down in North Carolina, I want to say 2 years ago. No, maybe that was last year. No, 2 years ago for $5. And this game actually goes for, I want to say like 20 bucks, something like that. Alright, I'm going to move these carts real quick. Actually, no, before I do that. Next up is Cotton 100%. This is a reproduction, but it's a really fun shooting game if you are not familiar with the Cotton series. Shooter. It's great fun. It's chibi. How can you go wrong? I would recommend a reproduction cart, as actual carts get pretty expensive. Another reproduction cart, one I've talked about already, and that's SD Gundam Wing. Probably the best fighting game on the system, at least in my opinion. And then, can't go wrong with Super Mario Kart. Absolute classic. Alright, let's go through some more American titles. First up, one of the first games I bought the day I got my Super Nintendo, Jurassic Park. I want to say I got that for $5. And you know what? Here's the other game I got right along with it. Natsume Championship Wrestling, which is pretty good if you know how to use, if you know how to use the Japanese wrestling game system. It's a pretty fun game. It plays a lot like the Fire Pro games. And here we have a game you'll hear me talk about soon enough, and that's Joe and Mac, which is it's a game I constantly go back to every once in a while and just absolutely love it. I don't know, it's just a fantastic game to play on like a Sunday evening for me, or like a late afternoon. I don't know, it's just like the perfect sit down and play game. And then here we have another classic, Star Fox. I don't really have much to say about Star Fox. It's a game I've played very little of, and I bought to do a review of it to see if it still holds up, and I never really got around to that, so maybe that'll still happen. Because I don't have any nostalgia tied to this game, so I really wanted to get it to see if it held up, and it was alright. It still seemed pretty good, but maybe I'll get around to doing that review since I've now mentioned it on video. Alrighty, another nostalgic game for me, Alien vs. Predator. I'm a huge fan of the Alien and Predator franchises, which many of you probably do not know. And another game that goes hand in hand with this one is Alien 3 for the Super Nintendo, which is another very nostalgic game. And this is one of the few American licensed games by LGN that is worth playing. Alien 3 for the SNES is the best version, or is the best Alien 3 game, and it is quite fun. Here's my actual cart of Wolfchild. My lord, this thing weighs nothing compared to like the Alien 3 cart. The Alien 3 cart's kind of heavy. Or no, the Alien vs. Predator cart is kind of heavy. But, Wolfchild. Yep, there's the cart. It's in pretty good condition. The box was beat up, but the game stayed in pretty good condition. And lastly is an old birthday present of mine, Total Carnage, which is not the greatest port because you don't have unlimited lives, which is a pain in the ass because this game is brutal. And I've actually never played through, even with cheats, through this entire version of the game. But maybe one day I'll do that. Maybe I'll do a Dare to Compare on this versus the arcade. Alright, getting back to Super Famicom games. Fuck these things are a pain in the ass to get out of this box. First up is Sailor Moon S or Sailor Moon Super S, and it's a puzzle game. This is a really, really fun puzzle game, by the way, and it's fairly cheap. Next up we have a game I've talked about on the channel, and probably the best racing game for the system, besides... This is probably the best versus racing game on the system, because I don't think this is better than F-Zero, but it's SD F1 Grand Prix. I do think that game is better than Mario Kart. Next up we have segue Hibariki. Still a really fun game to play with a bunch of people. When the virus is gone and shipping rates have gone down, I still cannot recommend getting that one enough. And another favorite game of mine on the console, Melvin Stories. It's kind of crazy. I don't know. That's one of my favorite reviews, especially because nobody had really talked about the game on YouTube prior to that video. And that's kind of what I love to do, is just find these weird games nobody's talked about and shed some light on them. Speaking of one of those games, here's one of my most recent reviews with his Chibimata-chan. Fun little Konami joint. Next up, we have Soko Keto Dion, or Mobile Armored Dion. This is an interesting game. It's a shooter, and it's a pretty good one. And it did technically come out in the States, but there were some cosmetic changes. They changed level 2, and yeah, they changed some stuff in level 1 and level 2, and made it less interesting. So I absolutely picked up the Japanese version, and would recommend you do the same if you want it. I wish I could remember what the American version was called, but it'll pop up on screen right about now. Next up is an interesting game, which I think I talked about in the last video, and that's UFO Common Yokisoban, which is a weird, pretty bad beat-em-up, based on a brand of yokisoba, and its mascot, which was like a superhero, who has the packaging on his head. Yeah, it's a kind of interesting, fun curiosity. I got it for $1, so I really can't complain. Yeah, but if you have like an hour or 45 minutes to waste and just want to play a mindless beat 'em up that's kind of weird, check out this game. Super Dodgeball, not the most amazing game, but pretty fun. And then we have Papuwa-kun, which I just talked about a couple months ago in my cheap yet good imports. Alrighty, moving right along to the next set of games. First up, we have a classic, and that is Super Castlevania 4. And look at this cover. It is just awesome. It kicks the crap out of the US version, honestly. Like, look at how menacing Dracula looks. It's great. Also, you gotta love the logo, where they incorporate the castle into the logo. It's great. Fantastic game. Probably my favorite Castlevania. Another game I talked about in that cheap imports video, and that is easily the greatest Tetris game ever made. Tetris Battle Gaiden. If you don't like Tetris, try this game. It's so much fun. Even playing by yourself, it is a ton of fun, but it is made better with friends. Still, this is the greatest Tetris game, if not the greatest puzzle game ever made. Here we have Super Hammer & Harry, which is a game I will probably talk about at some point as a nice little follow-up to my Hammer & Harry Ghost Building Company review for the Game Boy. This is a fun game, but it is kind of difficult. And I've played it only a small handful of times and have not been able to make it past this one jump in like the first or second level. But when I sit down and put some serious time into it, I'm sure I will discover that there's a whole lot more there than just one bad jump. Here is one of my favorite games of all time, not even just on the system, but of all time, and that's Ghost Super Mukami. And you know what? There's not much left I can say about this game. My 12-minute video of this game really says it all. It's just an amazing, amazing game that I cannot recommend enough. Up we have Ryders Spirit, which is has a very interesting cover. It's very patriotic, very American, which I'm sure it's not going for, but maybe it is. Anyways, I've talked about this one. Check out the review to hear more. Alright. Coming down to my last few Super Famicom games here. Here's one I just talked about this year, and that is Wakawaku Ski Wondershoot. I'd still recommend picking this up if you love racing games. It's still pretty fun. Oh boy, stuff is starting to tip over in here. Here is another one of the games in like the Battle Racer series and the Great Battle series, and it's Teku Fight. This is kind of a Bomberman clone, but instead of with bombs, you have like chain whips. It's interesting. I know for sure I will talk about this in a future video. If you're looking for one of the best beat-em-ups on the system, Ghost Chaser Densai is one of the best. It's up there. It's a really, really good game, and it has quite a variety of attacks and moves, which really keeps it fresh. I cannot recommend this game enough, and I will absolutely get around to talking about that at some point. Mega Man 7. Pretty good game. Pretty good game. Not the best, but it's a good one for the Super Nintendo. Next up is Kirby Superstar or Super Deluxe in Japan. It's the same game, but it's really cheap. I got this for $1 as opposed to like the $30 it costs for the US card. So I recommend importing that game if you don't want to pay inflated prices. And here's my most latest review, which is Goldfish Warning. This cart has seen some wear, it's seen some sun. It's kind of yellowing on the top here. But still, considering how expensive this game was and I got this for $16, I really can't complain. Starting off strong with one of the most recognizable carts in my collection, Doom. This one had a big ass sticker over the front of it when I bought it, and I had to work quite a bit to get most of it off, and there's still some on there. But it's Doom. How can you not own Doom? Next up is probably the worst reproduction I have. It looks like garbage. The logo doesn't even fit in there properly. But it is of a crazy expensive and weird game, which I'll talk about in the near future. And that is Gourmet Sentai Barayato. Interesting, very, very weird beat-em-up game. Highly recommend this one with Ghost Chaser Densai. Here's another great two-player game for the system, and that's Goof Troop. Not a lot of people talk about this game, but it is a wonderful two-player experience. Fun, kind of over-the-top puzzle platformer game. Very, very fun. Here's a classic Smash TV. How can you go wrong with this game? Of course, I've already taken a look at Total Carnage. This is a much better port than Total Carnage is. Very, very faithful, a lot of fun. Still a ton of fun to play with people to this day. Here's another reproduction, a very good one, and that's Legon Powered. Now, I still swear that Flying Hero is the best shooter on the system, but this is a pretty close second. This rivals Flying Hero, Axelay, and Space Megaforce. Really good game. Check it out if you have not played it or have not heard about it. Alrighty, and now we're coming down to the last handful of games. Starting off with Legon Paradise, which is of course a game I've already talked about on the channel, but you know, go watch that video if you want to hear me say more. I would say it's a fun little game. I don't know what it's going for anymore, but last time I checked, which was probably a year ago, it was going for like $5 to $6. So if it's still going for that price, I would recommend picking this up for cheap. Here's the good Ramo and Half game, and I believe it's Ramo and Half Rantohen, something like that. If you need to look it up, there's the code SHVC-5K. This one plays much closer to a Street Fighter or a Fatal Fury or King of Fighters. I highly recommend getting this game if you are a Ramo and Half fan and want some Ramo and Half Super Nintendo in your life. Rockman X or Mega Man X. This is a game I got with Rockman 7 and a couple of other games a couple of years ago, and it's one I've never been a big fan of. It's an interesting game. I prefer the original series over the X series, but it is still a well-regarded game and one I need to spend more time with personally. Next up is Cybernator. This is a really interesting Konami joint that nobody really talks about. And I want to say it's based on like Mobile Suit Gundam or something like that. I want to say it's based on an anime in Japan. But it came out as Cybernator over here, and it is a fantastic platforming shooter game. Check out Cybernator if you've not. And lastly, I quite literally saved the best for last. Earthbound, which is easily my favorite game of all time. No game means quite as much to me as this one. No game quite does as much as this one. The music, the graphics, the story. There's so much to love about this game. And I think that's going to wrap up my Super Nintendo collection. I don't believe I'm forgetting any games. I don't have a ton. I think I have close to 70 games in my collection, or actually probably closer to 80. And that is all of them. As I get more, I'm sure I will update with more videos. But thanks for joining in and taking a look at my collection.